24-year-old Steve Judy is, by his own admission, a misfit. He is also a man eager to die.
Women are gullible. All women? All that I've met.
He asked for his own death. A man who had already crossed the line of violence, now staring down his own end. But why did he want it so badly? And what led him to take the lives of an innocent mother and her children? The chilling truth is about to unfold. In the spring of 1979, the quiet town of Indianapolis, Indiana, was about to be shaken by a crime that would change the community forever. On April 28, 1979, Terry Lee Chasteen, a 23-year-old single mother, was simply trying to get through her day. Like many working mothers, she was juggling her responsibilities, preparing to drop her 3 young children off at a babysitter's house before heading to work. That day, Terry encountered a man named Steven Timothy Judy. He was on the side of the road, offering help with what appeared to be a minor issue with her car. But what seemed like a harmless encounter quickly spiraled into a devastating crime. Judy's presence would alter the course of Terry's life and that of her children. What followed was a tragic and calculated act that would leave the community stunned. The sequence of events on that day would soon become a haunting reminder of the dark side of human nature, forever etched in the history of Indiana.
Welcome back to Fatal Verdict. In today's video, I will take you through the timeline of the life of Steven Timothy Judy, from his troubled upbringing to the shocking crime that would forever alter his fate. We'll explore the chilling details of his confession, his trial, and the controversial moments leading up to his execution. As we dive into the psychological depth of his actions, we'll also discuss the ongoing debates about the death penalty and the morality of executing someone who desires it. We want to hear from you. Comment below where you're watching from, and if you're not subscribed, we'd love to know why. Tell us in the comments. Your opinion matters, and we want to engage with you. Steven Judy, a man already known for his violent tendencies and troubled past, lured Terry and her children to a secluded location. At the time, his motivations remained unclear, but his actions spoke volumes. What seemed like a simple road encounter turned into an act of profound violence, leaving 4 lives lost. For weeks after the crime, investigators worked tirelessly to uncover the truth. But at the outset, the motive behind Judy's actions was a mystery. What drove him to this, and how did someone with such a troubled history end up crossing the line into such a horrific act? This is the beginning of a case that would raise hard questions about justice, punishment, and the factors that lead someone to commit such acts. The investigation into Judy's involvement in the crime would uncover chilling details about his past, his mindset, and the dark path he had been walking for years. As the truth emerged, it would force the public to confront the harsh realities of crime and its consequences. But at that moment, the full picture had not yet been revealed. The crime was only the beginning of a much deeper investigation into the psyche of a man whose violent tendencies had long been simmering beneath the surface. This is the story of Steven Timothy Judy, a man whose actions would forever change the lives of his victims and raise difficult questions that continue to linger long after his case was closed. It is a story of crime, justice, and the chilling consequences of a life lived on the edge of society. Terry Lee Chasteen was a 23-year-old single mother living in Indianapolis, Indiana. She was raising 3 young children, Misty Ann, 5, Stephen, 4, and Mark, 2, while working at a local restaurant to make ends meet. Life was challenging, but Terry was focused on her children, determined to provide them with the best possible future despite the obstacles she faced. On the morning of April 28, 1979, Terry's day began like any other. She had to drop her children off at a babysitter's house before heading to work. It seemed like an ordinary errand for a mother, making sure her kids were cared for while she worked. But this ordinary routine would become a pivotal moment in the lives of those who knew her, as it would turn out to be the last time her children would see their mother. Terry's commitment to her children was her greatest driving force. As a single mother, she worked tirelessly to support them, balancing long hours at her job with raising her kids on her own. Her family and friends knew her as someone who was resilient and loving, always doing her best to keep her children safe and happy. Her death, unexpected and brutal, left a profound mark on her family. The loss of Terry was felt deeply, as her presence had been a source of stability and care for her children. What should have been an ordinary morning, one filled with routine, became a tragic day that would change the course of her family's life forever.
The impact on her family was immediate and heartbreaking, with no one able to fully process the loss of someone so central to their world. Steven Timothy Judy was born on May 24, 1956, in Indianapolis, Indiana, into a turbulent and abusive household. His father's alcoholism and violent tendencies cast a dark shadow over his early life, leaving a lasting impact on Judy. By the age of 13, Judy had already demonstrated troubling behavior, including acts of aggression and defiance. His upbringing exposed him to constant turmoil, and it shaped his worldview, one marked by anger, resentment, and an emerging disregard for authority. As a teenager, Judy's behavior grew more concerning. He was involved in arson and sexual offenses, crimes that would eventually lead to his time in juvenile detention. Unfortunately, the time spent in the juvenile system did little to curb his violent nature. Instead, it seemed to deepen his sense of bitterness and entitlement, fueling the resentment that simmered beneath the surface. Judy's criminal behavior escalated through his late teens and into adulthood. By 1977, he had been involved in a supermarket robbery while out on bond, a clear sign that his actions were becoming more brazen. He was no stranger to the criminal justice system, yet he continued to evade significant consequences. Judy's criminal record was growing, but he felt untouchable, a belief that only further fueled his reckless actions.
By the time he encountered Terry Lee Chastain in 1979, Judy's violent impulses were out of control. His disregard for the law and the lives of others had only intensified over the years, culminating in a brutal act that would forever change the lives of those around him. Judy's troubled upbringing, combined with his escalating criminal behavior, made him a dangerous individual, and what followed would demonstrate the full extent of his violent tendencies. In the days leading up to the crime, Steven Judy's behavior became increasingly erratic. He began confessing his dark thoughts to his foster mother, Mary Carr. Jubert shared unsettling details about his past, revealing that he had committed violent acts in several states. He spoke without remorse about his actions, even hinting that he had killed before. It was during these conversations that Judy's desire for the death penalty became clear. He repeatedly mentioned that he saw no way out, feeling as if his life was already over and death was the only release. Jubert's confessions were a chilling reflection of his state of mind. It was as though he had already accepted his fate, no longer seeing any future for himself outside of the cycle of violence. The more he talked about his past actions, the more it became evident that his next move was inevitable. The intensity of his words revealed a man growing increasingly detached from any sense of guilt or moral compass, and his intentions were beginning to surface with disturbing clarity. By the time he crossed paths with Terry Lee Chastain, Judy had made it clear to those close to him that he was ready to act on his violent impulses. His desire for an end, either through death or his actions, was consuming him, setting the stage for what would soon unfold.
On the morning of April 28, 1979,
Steven Timothy Judy encountered Terry Lee Chastain under the guise of offering help with a car issue. Terry, a 23-year-old mother, was on her way to drop her 3 children off at a babysitter's house before heading to work. Judy approached her with what appeared to be a kind gesture, but his intentions were anything but innocent. After offering assistance, Judy disabled Terry's vehicle, leaving her stranded with her children. He then convinced her to get into his car, claiming he would help her resolve the problem. He drove Terry and her children to a secluded location near White Lick Creek, a remote area away from any potential witnesses. Once they arrived, Judy asked the children to walk ahead before turning his attention to Terry. In a cold and calculated move, Judy murdered Terry and then proceeded to kill her children one by one. After Terry was killed, he drowned Miss Deanne, Stephen Michael, and Mark Lewis in the creek, ensuring no one would survive. His actions were swift and without hesitation, revealing the chilling nature of his crime. The bodies of Terry and her children were discovered shortly after, confirming the horror of the crime. What had started as a routine day for Terry and her children turned into an unimaginable tragedy. Judy's behavior was deliberate and merciless, setting in motion a chain of events that would forever change the lives of the victims' families and the community. The investigation into the crime unfolded rapidly, with law enforcement acting swiftly after the bodies of Terry Lee Chastain and her children were discovered. Witnesses came forward, describing a man seen in the area around the time of the crime. Their descriptions led the authorities to Steven Timothy Judy. Within hours, officers tracked him down and apprehended him. Judy offered no resistance when confronted by police, and he was taken into custody without incident. During the interrogation, Judy's response to questioning was chilling. He spoke about the crime with unsettling indifference, as though recounting a mundane event. He confessed to the murders with a shocking lack of emotion or remorse. His words were direct and to the point, revealing the cold, calculated nature of his actions. There was no fear, no guilt, and no sign of the weight of what he had done. He admitted to the crime as if it were an inevitable part of his life, making no attempt to justify his actions. Forensic evidence further solidified Judy's involvement in the murders. Investigators found fibers at the scene that matched Judy's clothing, confirming his presence at the crime site. His fingerprints were also discovered on various objects at the location, connecting him to the victims and the area. This physical evidence, combined with his confession, left little doubt about his role in the murders. As investigators pieced together the details, it became clear that this crime was not an isolated incident. Judy's previous criminal history, combined with his chilling confession, painted a disturbing picture of a man who had been consumed by violent tendencies for years. Yet the question remained: what drove him to commit such a brutal crime? What had pushed him to target Terry and her children? These were the questions the authorities had to answer, but they were left with a complex, unsettling portrait of a man who seemed beyond redemption. The trial of Steven Timothy Judy began in late 1979, just months after the brutal murders of Terry Lee Chastain and her children. From the outset, Judy's behavior in the courtroom was unnerving. His attitude was cold and detached, with no signs of remorse. Throughout the proceedings, Judy made it clear that he had no intention of fighting the charges against him. Instead, he openly expressed a desire to receive the death penalty. Judy's defense team attempted to argue that he should not be held fully accountable due to mental illness. They claimed that Judy's troubled past, including a history of violence and abuse, had contributed to his actions. However, Judy's behavior in court undermined this argument. In stark contrast to the defense's plea for mercy, Judy made chilling statements, including threats of committing further violence if he were not sentenced to death. These threats seemed to confirm the prosecution's belief that Judy was fully aware of his actions and had no regard for human life. The case was clear-cut. Judy had confessed to the murders, and forensic evidence confirmed his presence at the crime scene.
The physical evidence, combined with his admission, left the jury with little to deliberate. After a short period of deliberation, the jury returned a unanimous verdict: guilty. Judy's actions were undeniable, and the evidence was overwhelming. The judge, after considering Judy's lack of remorse and his unsettling desire for death, imposed the death penalty. The verdict reflected the severity of Judy's crime and the chilling nature of his request for execution. His trial was over, and the decision was made. Judy's fate was sealed, and the legal process came to a swift conclusion, leaving many to reflect on the complexities of justice in cases like this, where the perpetrator's own request for death played a significant role in the outcome. In an unexpected turn during the trial, it was revealed that Steven Judy had written a letter to a renowned psychiatrist while in custody, offering a disturbing proposal. He suggested that, if granted the death penalty, he would reveal the locations of several other undiscovered crimes across the country, crimes he claimed to have committed during his travels. This letter, which was never verified or investigated further, sparked wild speculation in the media, leaving the public wondering if Judy was truly a lone perpetrator or part of a much larger, unseen pattern of violence. What if there were more victims hidden in his past? What if his confession was only the tip of the iceberg? On March 9, 1981, Steven Timothy Judy faced the end he had requested. He was taken to the Indiana State Prison's execution chamber, where he would be put to death by electrocution. Judy's final moments were marked by an unsettling calmness. Throughout the day, he showed no signs of fear. His actions indicated resignation, as though he had long accepted his fate. Judy's final meal consisted of prime rib, lobster tails, and potatoes, a meal far from the gravity of the occasion. Despite the indulgent meal, Judy's behavior remained detached. He did not speak much, only quietly preparing for the inevitable. His focus seemed fixed on the execution ahead, and there was no indication that he sought comfort from the food. As the time approached for the execution, Judy was led into the chamber. He was strapped to the chair, and at 12:45 a.m., the process began. The room was quiet, the atmosphere heavy with the weight of the moment. Judy's final words were brief and unemotional. "I'm sorry for what I did. I don't know what happened to me." His statement was stark and devoid of further explanation, leaving the courtroom and the public to interpret his true feelings. The execution was carried out as planned, marking the end of Judy's life and the conclusion of a tragic chapter. His death raised broader questions about the death penalty, the nature of his crimes, and the complexities of justice. The finality of the moment left the community reflecting on the consequences of such a brutal and senseless act of violence, as Judy's journey toward execution came to a close. Following Steven Timothy Judy's execution, the emotional aftermath left many grappling with the weight of the case. In the weeks after his death, Judy's confessions to other martyrs came to light, including admissions of crimes committed in Louisiana and Indianapolis. These claims, however, were met with skepticism. Whether they were genuine or merely the desperate words of a man facing the end is still debated today. His confessions added a layer of complexity to the case, leaving both law enforcement and the public questioning if there were more victims out there, or if it was simply the ramblings of someone trying to make sense of his own fate. Judy's case ignited fierce debates about the death penalty. His lack of remorse and his request for execution left many disturbed, sparking an emotional conversation about the ethics of ending someone's life when they actively seek it. How much responsibility does society hold when someone requests death? Should the state grant that request? Judy's case made the execution seem less like an act of justice and more like a tragic reflection of a man who had long given up on himself and the world around him. For some, Judy's death marked the end of a chapter, but for others, it symbolized the haunting complexity of the death penalty, raising uncomfortable questions that lingered to this day. His case, in the end, wasn't just about a crime. It was a conversation about life, death, and the line between justice and mercy. The scars left behind by Judy's actions and his execution would continue to shape the broader conversation for years. Steven Judy's case brings up a disturbing reality. Should we be executing individuals who actually want to die? When someone asks for their own death, are we giving them what they deserve, or are we merely ending their suffering in a way that we, as a society, find more acceptable? Judy's lack of remorse and his desire for death complicate the argument for the death penalty. Should we be punishing someone who is already punishing themselves in the most extreme way? And if someone truly wants to die, are we morally obligated to let them, or is this the moment we should intervene? How much responsibility does the state bear when executing someone who has given up on life? Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting and even more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.